So first of all, you guys are absolute shredders, and you're also doing the YouTube thing pretty successfully, which has been really cool to see. But one of the things I really wanted to talk to you guys today about is this new kind of idea of a mountain bike board game that you guys started. Could you tell me a little bit about, your guys' background quickly, and then kind of what you're doing now?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we both race professionally and are doing YouTube, which it turns out doing YouTube when there's a pandemic is a very good thing because all the races are canceled. So we still have something to work on and spend time on and a way to connect with
But
people.
we're not quite crazy busy enough, so we had to launch another course.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. So this is an idea that actually, so 6 months ago, going back a little bit, I had my worst crash that I've ever had. I separated my left shoulder, stitches, concussion. Obviously, I was on the couch for a while, and during that time, trying to stay away from screens, played a bunch of board games with our friends, and also thinking a lot about how I could make sure never to do what I had done on that crash, and just how to sort of prepare more effectively so that I didn't do that. Because honestly, I was distracted and I was like, whatever, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to go for it. And I didn't give it the respect that it deserved. It was like a 15-foot porch drop.
Yeah, you have a video of all that, right? Like you posted a video with you hitting it.
Yeah.
It was a very weird crash for Macky. He doesn't usually crash on stuff like that, but I think it just raced the epic rides, 50 miler. That was the first time he'd done a 50-mile XC race in years. Yeah. And then we were in Arkansas, so we were riding all the trails, and then just no rest, no thought process in that. So
I was distracted. We were setting up the drone to get a drone shot. There was all this stuff that I wasn't focused on the drop. And I think that's why I just hit it wrong. It wasn't something happened, I got a flat tire, I just didn't execute the drop. And so I was spending a lot of time thinking about that, being how can I make sure never, ever to make that mistake again, because it was a very painful mistake. And my brain eventually sort of connected board games and this idea of how can you responsibly and better do difficult big features. And so that was sort of the seed of the idea.
Knowing you through racing, and you guys have always been very professional and calculated, and it's kind of a perfect fit when I saw the way that the board games played, where you kind of develop your skills and basically get the skill set to do the obstacle before you just send it. So
yeah, we wanted to kind of encourage people to be yeah, I get to, as I become a better rider, I get to hit bigger features, and that's really cool. That's the fun part, is we all like hitting bigger, harder, cooler features. But you can't just be oh, I've been riding my bike for 1 month and I'm going to go do a 15-foot drop. That, obviously that doesn't work. You need to build the skills, and you need to have a certain skill set. And then in addition to that, once you have that skill set, there are ways to make yourself more likely to successfully do the feature without crashing, without hurting yourself. And so we wanted to kind of tie those two things in there. And it's been really fun because we've had a lot of people play the game, play prototypes of the game. And we've heard from them weeks later, months later, and they're I've started thinking about features differently. I used to just be whatever, I'm rolling the dice essentially whether or not I'm going to crash. And now they're there are things I can do to increase my likelihood of hitting this feature properly. And, I can back out the landing, I can prepare, I can visualize. And because of this game, they're now sort of going through this mental checklist of, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and then I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do this thing. And now I have a better chance of being ready for it so that I'm going to succeed instead of crashing and ending up in the ER like I did.
Yeah, it's cool. It's almost kind of, in a way, teaching people the technique and the strategy of calculated risk. Because a lot of people that don't grow up with racing or don't grow up having to pick lines and figure out what to do, and being able to watch, 100 people come through the same section, and you can kind of walk the track, learn it, watch people hit it, and you calculate your risks to be this is worth 1 second, or this is not, worth the risk for that 1 second. So I think that's really cool. And it's awesome that you'll be able to kind of bring that into a new generation of people that haven't been able to experience it before.
That's the hope. Yeah. Is, allow people to see these things in a, safe way, and then be able to take that out onto the trails and apply it in person on a real feature when they're actually riding their bikes.
That's cool.
The game is also fun.
It
I
is
feel like you
fun.
made
Yeah,
it
that's a
sound
good
really
point.
like educational.
Yeah.
It's not educational
educational.
necessarily. It's just like we did try really hard to not. It would have been a lot easier to make a mountain bike game that was all like dinner, just like without much thought to that aspect. So I think that was in a lot of ways, I think the challenging aspect of creating a game that's like sort of shows these values as well as being fun.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Some strategy and they
like make it replayable.
Exactly. Yeah. And so one stat I like to throw out there is when you set up the board, you can randomly set it up and there's different feature tiles. And based on the number of feature tiles there's 3,456 possible setups. So you could literally play the game every single day for almost 10 years and never play the same board twice. So
I'm not sure you'd want to do that.
I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying you could. But like because of that, all of a sudden you have the opportunity of like every time you play the game, it's a different setup. So many of these games, Monopoly, Candy, like the games that a lot of people are familiar with. Sorry, like the board is set; it never changes. And so we wanted to make it something where like the board is different every single time. There are variables, like you might get a different rider each time, and they have different skill sets. So we wanted it to be, we didn't want it to just be like, oh, you play it once or twice and you understand how it works and that's it and you never want to play it again. Like we wanted it to be different and fun every single time. And so that was a big part of what we were doing is like, how do we bring in strategy? Because there is dice rolling. So there is an aspect of luck. But then how do you bring in strategy so that it's not just like a, roll the dice, whoever gets the highest numbers wins. We wanted it to require thinking and strategy and like stealing things. And, there's ways to mess with other people, to sabotage other people. And those are all what I think make board games fun is like you see who's winning and you're like, oh no, they're winning. And then you try to sabotage them and then somebody else starts winning. And if you're winning, they try to sabotage you. And it's always sort of this dynamic of you're hanging out with your friends and you're sort of messing around with them, but at the same time, like encouraging them. And a big part of it is like this storytelling aspect. Like anytime you crash, you have to make up a story about how you crashed and then what happened. Because like we all do that, we'll finish a race run and someone's like, oh dude, like on that rock garden, I was going through and I was going really well, but then I clipped my handlebar on a tree. Like we all have these stories. It's such a big part of mountain biking.
And they're usually a little embellished, so this kind of like gives you free rein to like, oh, totally nuts.
What's it look like for you guys then when you kind of get this, light bulb goes off in your head and you say, I think that we can do this and I think that we should try to do this. What is the process like for prototyping and how long does that take? And like, how many hours did you just sit there and stare at a blank board and try to figure this out?
Well, the first thing, Macky made one out of cardboard and then somehow coerced my entire family into playing it over Thanksgiving. Some of whom are not mountain bikers and others of whom are mountain bikers but profess to hate board games. So it was a good sample.
and none of them.
Everyone had fun.
Yeah, everyone enjoyed it. We were like, yeah, Syd's dad, he's like, I don't play board games, I don't do it. But I convinced him to play it and he actually enjoyed it, which was really cool. And her uncle, he was like, I don't know about board games or mountain biking. And then he played it and also enjoyed it. We're like, okay, if we can get the two of them to like enjoy the game, it's not just gonna appeal to mountain bikers.
But it was definitely pretty funny for a while because like everyone we visited or all our friends that we saw in December, like Macky's pulling out this like cardboard with like little pieces of paper and everyone's like, I don't know if this is how I want to spend my evening. And then they all have fun. So it was a good. Yeah,
that made us feel like, okay, this is something that could be a real game. Like people are enjoying it enough that they're willing to sit down and play this game, even though it's printed out on like, there was a cardboard version, there was a like printed, and it was just like there was no color on it, and people were still willing to play it, had fun with it, even when it looked terrible. So we were like, okay, the idea behind the game works. Now let's figure out how to make it like actually look like a cool, beautiful board game. And we sort of put out a call on social media and said, hey, who knows somebody who's a good artist, who understands mountain biking? And a bunch of people recommended Christina, who is Sketchy Trails on Instagram. And she's done a ton of work for both mountain bike companies, like Shimano has hired her, and then as well as a bunch of the mountain bike YouTubers. So she's done work for Seth and Alex. And so she's extremely talented, understands mountain biking. And we just sort of sat down with her and we're like, hey, you know, what would it cost? Can we hire you? We would love to have your artwork. And it was really cool because she got into it. She was like, I love board games and I can draw. And so this is really cool.
She was a little skeptical at first.
She was definitely skeptical.
I think it was like, I think her first impression of Macky was like, okay, there's like a lot of enthusiasm here, but like, this is never actually gonna happen. Like, there's no way. But then I think when she realized that we were invested in actually making it happen, she was like, all right, I'm in.
Yeah, and honestly, like the first time that I heard about this whole situation and kind of like learned about the board game, I was curious, like, how is this going to play out? Because I didn't know if it was going to be something that was just kind of like it's a, you know, a random board game that we put mountain biking characters on, or if it was going to be like a dedicated mountain bike board game experience. And once I saw that you guys had like really thought through it and you have the training and the, you know, line selection, you have the risk reward type scenarios, like it's really cool. And I think that the more people understand about it, the more people are going to want to be a part of it and play it. It sounds like they are pretty receptive of it too, because you guys killed it on the Kickstarter like immediately.
Yeah. It was kind of nuts, actually. I think we hit the funding goal in 8 hours.
Yeah, just under 8 hours. And that sort of told us like, okay, there is enough interest that we can make this into an actual game. And, you know, the focus is like getting the Kickstarter done, getting that first run done. You know, we'd love to potentially have it in retail locations, but our focus is definitely like the backers right now who are supporting the project and helping make it like a real thing. Because, you know, we didn't have $25,000 to just like throw into a game to go print off a bunch of initial copies. Like it's expensive. So having all these people like be like, I believe in this game, I really want a copy, that allowed us to actually like hit that funding goal and make it a real thing. So we, you know, it's still open. We have another 20 days of the campaign, and we're hoping to keep getting people to support the project, because we have some stretch goals of like, we're going to add a card to one of the decks and let people decide, like choose what that card is. At a higher level, we want to have 3D miniatures of the riders instead of like little, you know, 2-dimensional tokens like we have right now. So we've got these ideas of ways to make the game better, but we have to hit certain goals because there's, you know, increased costs. So the more copies of the game that you order, the less each unit costs, at which point we can then add more expensive components like 3D figurines and that kind of stuff. So we're hoping to hit some of these stretch goals, because we've got some really cool stuff that we're like, this would make the game even cooler. But once again, it's expensive. So we have to like, you know, if people are willing to support the project, then we'll actually be able to add those aspects.
You know, we've been bike racers and like content creators, but like a digital product is very different than a physical product. Even if like a lot of the marketing and all that transfers over, but you know, just Macky's been on Skype calls with like Taiwan and like like this whole side of things that, you know, we're kind of familiar with being in the bike industry, but we've never been like responsible for, and it's really eye-opening in a lot of ways.
It's crazy, like realizing, okay, so you can get the games printed for less in China, which is great, but then you have to get them to people because it's a physical product. Whereas like, you know, a video, doesn't matter who's watching it. It's, you know, it's free essentially to get to everybody. Whereas this, it's like more expensive to send it here than it is to send it here. And like, how do you balance that out while still making it available to everyone? And it's been, we were sort of hoping like, okay, we'll launch the Kickstarter and then like, we'll have a little bit of a break. And it's been like,
no.
We launched the Kickstarter and things got even crazier because we were like, wow, this is actually happening. Now we need to decide on a manufacturer and decide on a shipping partner and, you know, all this stuff. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
But really cool.
How did you guys get started, like kind of discovering the process of like getting it manufactured? Did you have friends that you could rely on, or was it all just self-taught? Like, we need to find a board game manufacturer and these are some of the best ones. And like, what does that look like? Cause I'm curious, manufacturing a product, the hardest step is getting started and making the right connection. Then once you have those pieces in place, it's like, oh yeah, we do this all the time. So
Yeah.
what was that discovery process like for you guys?
It involved a lot of Googling. And there's, fortunately, the board game genre is very popular now, especially on Kickstarter. I think it's one of the most popular categories on Kickstarter. And there's a lot of people who've written about, how to do a Kickstarter board game and have recommendations on manufacturers and fulfillment companies and all this. And so I've just been reading tons and tons and then reaching out to different companies to get quotes and sort of make sure they have a good reputation, because we want to make sure that when people get the game, they're like stoked and impressed and like, wow, this is even better than I thought. We don't want anyone to be like, oh, like these feel kind of flimsy, like this is kind of crappy. Like, we want it to just blow people away. And so that's why a lot of games on Kickstarter will have lower funding goals, and then they'll upgrade the components at like different stretch goals. And from the get-go, we wanted it to be like the nicest components so that it lasted a long time, so people like felt like they were getting a premium product.
And I think the only exception to that is the 3D miniatures, but I actually think the 2D ones turned out really good. But to do any sort of 3D stuff, you have to purchase a mold, which is thousands of dollars. Expensive. So that's not doable at like 500 copies. But yeah. I would say the good thing about doing something like a board game, as opposed to like the bike industry companies that we work with that are coming up with new technology, and like we're essentially just doing things like these manufacturers have all done all of these things before. It's just different graphics and stuff like that. So.
And we have slightly different stuff. Our board is a dual layer board. So the top layer has cutouts that like the tiles fit into. And that's, I would say, not common. Like most board game manufacturers can do it, but they don't do it at all regularly. So for them, it was like, oh, okay, that's going to be a little more expensive. It's going to be a little more complicated. But for us, like I said, that's what gives the ability to have these totally different board setups every time. And we've even thrown around the ideas of like what people call expansion packs, where you might have like the Moab expansion, and then you get this whole set of tiles that are all like features in Moab. So it'd be like the Amasa backdrop and Captain Ahab, and so it would be a cool way then people could have this base board, and they could be like, oh, I really want the expansion pack from Whistler, and then they could get like the Whistler one. So it'd be a way to sort of customize your own board without having to just buy an entire new set of the game each time. And so that was one thing that we didn't want to just print them on the board, because then you only have one setup and you're just playing the same board over and over.
So your crash was like last fall, right? And so all this has happened like within the last 6 months, basically?
Yeah, basically.
It's been kind of crazy. But yeah, we came up with the first idea, and I basically was like, Syd, like, here's an idea. What are your thoughts? We started like throwing stuff back and forth, and I was just like taking notes on it. It's funny to go back and read the notes, because like it has completely changed from the first idea that we had, but that's definitely what kicked it off. And then we had like cardboard prototypes, we had printed prototypes. Like I had one that I had printed by a board game company, because you can do these one-offs. And it was all just like clip art that I ripped off the internet just to like get an idea of what it would look like with actual graphics. And, so we just played all these different variations and had people play them, got feedback, and like just constantly changed things. Like I would say we had a pretty significant change to the game in like February or March.
February.
Yeah. That's when we like redesigned the entire board. Yeah. So it's just been like a super fast process of like, try something, have people test it, see what they think, change it. Try something, test it, change it. Just over and over. And, it's gotten slightly more strategic and changed. I guess some people would say it's gotten like more complicated, but I think before it was too simple. It was more like a roll and move, they call it, like a Candyland, where you just like roll the dice, move the space. Like that wasn't fun. We were like, okay, we want more strategy where you're making decisions. And so we added some components there. And, you know, at this point, I'm pretty darn pleased with it. I think it's pretty fun. And everybody we've played it with has like, they start off and they're like, I'm not sure. And then by the end of the game, they're like into it and they're yelling and they're telling stories and they're just having a blast.
I think it's really funny. I feel like a lot of adults or young adults kind of like our age like don't want to like board games. Like they kind of think they're too cool for it. But then like if you actually get them to like sit down and do it, like whether it's Send It or Catan or anything, like people get really cutthroat like right away.
They also, like one aspect of the game is before you attempt to send a feature, you have to say, okay guys, like here's how I prepared. Should I send it? And then everybody else goes, send it. And
People
like,
hate it. They're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And then like by 2 turns in, everyone's like, send it, send it, send it. It's really funny.
And it's great because then like we've almost always seen after the game, people start just using send it for other stuff. So like someone will be like, okay, good game, guys. Like, should I go wash the dishes? And someone's like, send it. And it becomes a thing. And it's like a way of bringing people together and they all have this like shared experience and some inside jokes from like different crashes that happen. They're like, hey, what about that time that you like, you know, slid out on a route on a technical climb and like broke both your ankles? And like, you know, that obviously didn't happen in real life, but it's this inside joke that people refer to when they're riding and when they're hanging out. And so you get this whole like, you know, you just have all these inside jokes and moments with people that came from, you know, hanging out and playing like an hour and a half long board game.
That's really cool.
I think to kind of go back to your question earlier, though, the whole coronavirus COVID thing definitely like made this happen a lot faster than we had kind of originally planned.
Yeah.
Had a discussion in early April and we were like, maybe we should just do the Kickstarter in May because we don't know how long this is going on. Like if people are still stuck at home in November, like, or maybe they're just sick of all the board games that they have now. Like I think when COVID first happened, we were kind of in this mindset of like, this is a bad thing for Send It. Like it's a bad time to launch a new thing. People don't want to spend money. Like this, that, and the other. And then we started to be able to think of it more as an opportunity of like, this is a time when people are playing board games. Like they are getting tired of the board games that they have. Like they are spending more time with their family and like trying to figure out, you know, ways to make that work. And I think it was a gamble for sure when we decided to do it in May. We were kind of worried that I'd be like, oh, maybe everyone's like too concerned about the economy, like maybe we won't hit the goal at all, and gamble paid off in this case.
Yeah,
for sure.
And we wanted, like originally we were planning to launch in, you know, at the earliest June, but then that pushed our timeline of being able to deliver the game to people farther back. And we're like Syd said, we have no idea how long this is going to last. So the sooner we can get the game to people, the better. And, you know, we decided to include a print and play one. So like anybody who supports the project at the end of the campaign, they'll receive, like they'll have downloadable files that they can print off and like basically cut out some pieces and tape them together and be able to play the game now in, you know, sort
it
of.
Does require a lot of printing.
Yeah,
it requires a good printer. You can make it happen.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, for some people, they're like, I want to play the game now, and we can't do production like that. Like with the prototypes we've had to print out, they cost us over $200 a piece. So like, you know, if people wanted to pay $200 something for a game, they could get a game, but like nobody wants to pay that much for a board game. So we're like, we'll get the printed one so people can play that as they wait for the actual version to come. And you know, we want to try to help people make it through this time as comfortably and happily as they can, because this has been a rough time for everybody. It definitely has. It's, you know, I suspect going to be the defining moment of I don't know, at least the decade.
Yeah, and I think like you guys said, there's really not a clear timeline of when it's going to change. And, you know, if things do happen again next fall. And then it's like there's a potential that we could have this board game very necessary. I think the timing is really awesome, and I'm proud of you guys for making it happen. And I know how much work that takes. Like launching anything is so hard, and just seeing, I don't know, like my girlfriend works at a company and dealing with manufacturing all the time and talking to Taiwan and China. It's like such a nightmare that people don't understand that's going on in the background, and you guys are doing it for the right reasons. And I don't know, it's going to be cool, and I hope you guys have a ton of success with it.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah, it's definitely been a process. And, I'm just going to mention this real quick. Like a lot of people have expressed concern about how expensive the game is, because like the base level to get the game is $59. And, we wish that we could order 100,000 units, at which point it would cost like nothing per unit, and then we could sell it really cheap. But we just, we don't have the money to pay for 100,000 units. So like, if you think about it in terms of, this is the same price as one tire, and it's going to last a lot longer than your tire is going to.
And for you guys to, or people that say that too, like, dude, you can't go to the movies right now, but when you're going to the movies, if you have 3 kids, that's way more than $60 for one day of, 3 hours of entertainment. So if they're giving you a hard time for all the work and time you put in, then it's, they don't understand it. But
I mean, there's always somebody. I think the other question we get is like US manufacturing versus China. I think this has been really eye-opening to us about like why things are made in Asia. Because we did like originally we were like, maybe we can have this made in the US, like that would be awesome. Pretty much the only manufacturer we could find in the US has a 2,000 unit minimum, which is pretty prohibitive. Like we would have had to make our Kickstarter goal would have had to be $100,000 basically, and that's like not realistic at all. So that, I mean, I think that's just another reason, like when you do find companies that are making in the US that are making that work, like that's really awesome. And they've gone to a lot of effort to make that happen, because it's not super realistic for smaller companies, especially something like this.
I mean, if we could, it would be awesome if we were able to sell 2,000 copies, but even then the price difference US to Asia,
it's still more expensive.
It's like 500. Twice as expensive.
It's hard when you're competing against other board games that are in like the $19 price range, and if you come out with one that's $89.99 to be made in the USA, it's like, it's awesome, and you're going to have maybe 5% of people that won't buy it if it's made in Asia, but at the same time, like you're going to be able to affect so many more people and hopefully bring mountain biking into so many more homes that it's like, maybe long term that's a good goal to get it switched over. But right now I think you guys are doing what any small business really does.
Trying to make it affordable for both us and them. We want to not lose money on this. We're not going to get rich off of it, but if we could not lose
that was
money,
like pretty much our goal.
Awesome.
Like when Macky first was like, I'm going to do this, like we're doing Kickstarter, I was like, whoa, like let's make a spreadsheet. I'm not 100% sure if we raise $25,000 that we're not like going into debt on it. And that's why the Kickstarter goal was what it was, is that it's essentially like our break-even point. Like we can do this here and we won't have lost money. So that's great.
So now that we've gone past that, we might make a little bit of money, but basically every additional person who buys one, we have to buy another copy of the game. So it's not,
It wasn't a get rich plan.
It's not a get rich plan.
But I think it is, with any sort of passion project, it's good to sort of still think through of like, how can I not lose money on this? Because, we're not in a position to do that either.
Well, and it's cool too with Send It, like that could be almost any sport. So theoretically, this could be a scalable business where you have like Send It skiing or Send It snowboarding and so like the fact that you guys have that in place, like I'm excited to see what this is long term, because maybe mountain biking is just the first step in this process, and it could be a whole new franchise.
Who knows?
That's the hope.
Well, cool. What are you guys' next immediate steps moving forward before we kind of start wrapping this up? I just want to know, so now that you have the Kickstarter rolling, are you kind of looking at funding? Are you going to wait till the funding period's done and then start looking at how much you guys raise to do potentially the upsells? Or
so we have different stretch goals that are listed on the Kickstarter. So at 40,000, we're going to add a card. At 70,000, we'll do the 3D miniatures. At a higher level, we haven't decided exactly what it'll be, but we want to do painted miniatures. But we don't know if we will hit that level, obviously. So right now, it's just like trying to dial in the manufacturer. We've been talking to a couple different companies and getting quotes. So we're like, okay, which of these makes the most sense financially? Which of them has a good reputation for putting out, really nice content or really nice like games? So we're going to decide on a manufacturer. We're trying to figure out the shipping to make it less expensive for international backers. Because right now for the US, it's going to be like $10 to $15. But for international backers, it's like 25 plus. And we don't like, that's a lot.
It's challenging when you don't have the numbers. There's a lot of fulfillment places that are like, oh, you have 200 copies going to Australia. Like, we can fulfillment from there, but we don't have that right now. So that's kind of what we're trying to figure out. But I think we hope to be ready to like move forward with the manufacturing process as soon as the Kickstarter is over. We kind of have to be, basically.
Yeah. We want to try to stick to our timeline so that we have the games to people by the holidays, potential Christmas holiday gifts. And just, that's a time when even if coronavirus has gone away at that point, a lot of people aren't able to ride because it's too snowy. So we want to give people the ability to ride their bikes, even if it's through a board game when they can't otherwise.
And I think sort of towards the end of the Kickstarter period will be when we start thinking a little bit more seriously about selling copies like post Kickstarter, whether that means we're purchasing additional ones or working with a distributor or something like that. But at the moment, we haven't quite had the bandwidth to handle that yet.
Yeah, we've been pretty focused on like
at a time.
trying to get the Kickstarter funded, now try to decide on manufacturing and fulfillment so that we can make those shipping costs cheaper and encourage international backers to support the project also, because we would love to have this all over the world.
That's awesome. Well, for everyone that's listening to this, I'll definitely throw links to the Kickstarter below and links to the website that you guys have kind of up and running a little bit, and Facebook, and you have Facebook, Instagram, and where else can people find you?
Yeah, there's a YouTube, but it just has like our promo video and a how-to video. So there's not a ton of content going on there, but I would say Kickstarter and Instagram and Facebook are the ones that we're sort of updating the most regularly.
If you go to senditboardgames.com right now, that's redirecting to the Kickstarter. It has all the same information on the Kickstarter page. And the Kickstarter's over, you'll still be able to find updates and everything at senditboardgames.com.
That's awesome. I'm excited for you guys.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, cool. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to play it. And hopefully by Christmas, we'll have some sick board games in our house.
Yeah.
That's the hope.